Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Marty Ross, and this is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD tonight. This is a webinar where we talk about Lyme disease. You create the webinars with your questions, and no 2 weeks are identical, although sometimes we get into some similar themes per week. I'm interested in seeing what you all have in store for me tonight. This is the first of 3 weekly webinars, so we'll be doing one today, next week, and the week after that. Tomorrow morning, I will be sending out an email with the link to sign up for the next 2, if you haven't done so already. Also, I am recording the webinar, and so you'll get that email announcing that the webinar recording is ready. And if everything goes well with my edits and preparing it this evening or early tomorrow morning, you should get that probably by around sometime before 8:30 a.m. Seattle time. Sometimes I get it out very early, so we'll have to see how that all goes this evening. For those of you that are returning, I'm glad to see a number of new, familiar names on my message board, so you know how this works. For those of you that are new here, you create these webinars with your questions, and so you have to write questions. And the way you can do that is over on the right-hand side of the screen is a chat box down at the bottom. Write your questions to me through that. The only thing I ask is don't hit the enter key until the whole question is written. If you should hit the enter key before the whole question is written, it sends multiple questions my direction, which gets to be hard to manage over here. I will be posting your questions for those of you to see who are participating in the live webinar, okay? However, those questions are not readable when you're in the recorded version. So I am going to read those questions out loud, all right? So generally I can answer most of your questions. Sometimes you all ask me things that I'm not able to answer. And sometimes you raise points that get me thinking and even change how I might approach problems here too. So let's see what you got in store here. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. This first question is from Alex. Hi, Alex. Let's see. Good evening, Dr. Ross. I would like to know if eating healthy carbs like sweet potatoes or rice increases the chances of candida or other gut issues. I would like to reintroduce healthy carbs occasionally after being on a keto diet for 2 years. Would love to have your opinion. Thank you. All right. So the things that have the greatest likelihood of increasing yeast are simple carbs. All right. These would be carbs that don't have an adequate amount of fiber attached to them. So basically anything that's white, like white bread, doesn't have fiber attached to it. White rice is not going to be a good source. White potatoes are not good either. Sweet potatoes, on the other hand, have a lot of fiber attached, and so sweet potatoes are not a problem. Generally, if you're looking to add back in carbs that are safer to use to not promote yeast, they would be things that have fiber attached. So they could be whole grains, like brown rice, not white rice. They could be beans, legumes. Those are although they're carb sources, they have fiber attached, which decreases the availability of those sugars to feed your yeast, okay? Fruits and vegetables that have fiber attached are okay. I wouldn't do fruit juices. Fruit juices are straight sugar that doesn't have fiber attached, all right? So those are some thoughts that I have. Good luck to you, Alex. Hello, Justin. Let's see. I've read that an overactive immune system can be part to blame for the majority of chronic Lyme co-infection symptoms. Have you seen success with IV immunotherapy? Like to hear your thoughts on this. So I haven't. I'm not fully aware of whether there is success or not. I know there's a number of my colleagues, or there's some of my colleagues that do IV immunotherapy and they claim success. The trouble is we don't have anything to compare it to. So, I mean, they're doing it and they're seeing benefits, and maybe they are getting benefits, or maybe there's certain biases they have. I have no idea. But one of the things that we do know is that there can be an imbalance between 2 parts of the immune system, one called the TH1 system and one called the TH2. Think of the TH2 as being your antibodies and the allergy part of your immune system. and think of TH1 as being the cells that actually attack germs and fight them. And in active Lyme, sometimes you get increased TH1 versus TH2, you get an imbalance, okay? So there's some things you can do that might regulate that. I'm just not sure about whether they're fully successful or not, okay? All right, thanks for the question, Justin. Hello, Cynthia. Hi, Dr. Ross. My husband and I both have Lyme for 2 years now and have been treated since the beginning. We are still now using protection for sexual intercourse. We were wondering if we could remove it. We eventually would like to start a family. And also, what are the risks for oral sex? There seems to be different opinion. Thank you very much and have a good evening. So the reason there's a different opinion is there's not adequate science to direct us. So most of us have ideas, but the scientific basis behind sexual transmission, whether it's oral or through vaginal sex, is difficult. So let me tell you what we do know. We do know from 2 studies that were repeat of each other that look to see if men that have Lyme and women that have Lyme have it in their sexual fluids. So in one study, it was shown that men that have Lyme, it showed up in their male ejaculate 100% of the time. And in females that had Lyme, it showed up in female vaginal fluid 50% of the time. The other study showed the opposite results. The other study showed that in females, it showed up 100% of the time in their vaginal fluid when they had it, and 50% of the time in the male ejaculate when a man had it, all right? So we know it can be in the sexual fluids. Now, being in the sexual fluids doesn't necessarily mean it's transmittable, though, because to get into the body, it has to get absorbed somehow into the bloodstream. Keep in mind that ticks, when they spread this, have perfected ways to make sure that those germs actually get into our bodies. Or Lyme has worked with ticks to perfect it. So in tick saliva, there's a lot of enzymes that help prevent blood clotting, and other chemicals within the tick saliva that enhance the ability for the germ to get into somebody, and that also suppress the immune system so to have a hard time fighting it. If you have it in your ejaculate or you have it in vaginal fluid, it doesn't mean that the body is, it is very possible that our normal barriers would be enough to keep these things from getting into us, okay? All right, now, there's a study that was done that was a horrid study, really bad study, that was published about, I think, 4 or 5 years ago now by Dr. Ray Stricker and his colleagues. And the reason I say it was a bad study is it looked at 13 people. I will tell you, in medicine, you can't generalize anything based on a study of 13 people because it's hard to say if that can be replicated in large population. But what they did in this study is they concluded that it could be sexually transmitted based on this study. And what they specifically did is, of these 13 people that had Lyme, they looked to see, was it in the vaginal fluid and was it in the male ejaculate? And not only did they do that, they looked to see what specific strains were in the vaginal fluid and what specific strains were in the male ejaculate, okay? And of those 13 people, there were 3 couples. And in each person in the couple, they had identical strains that they detected, all right? Now, one of the biggest problems with this study is we don't know when the last time the male ejaculated into the female. They didn't control for that. They didn't tell us how long it had been, or maybe the couples had just had intercourse. So when they're measuring the Lyme in a female's vaginal fluid, and it happens to be the same identical strain as the male, it may be because the male just deposited his ejaculate in the female. Could be, all right? Or it may be that Lyme from the male lives in the vaginal fluid but doesn't infect the female, meaning it doesn't work into the blood, but it could live there for a week or 2. We don't know. No one's done those studies to know how long this stuff can live there, all right? So the issue is we don't know what they were picking up in the female vaginal fluid that's the same strain as the male. Was it because it's just a male deposit that got into the female and just didn't get absorbed into the blood? Okay, we or may not even get absorbed into the blood. So that's kind of a worthless study as well, too. So the truth is, we don't know if these are sexually transmitted or not based on the science. We know it is in the fluids. We know it's in the fluids in terms of if you do oral sex and there's ejaculation, there's that possibility it could be in those fluids. And we know it's in the fluids if a male ejaculates in a female, but we still don't know for sure whether they're transmitted. Now, in my practice, I tend to see, and a lot of us that treat Lyme tend to see that there are certain couples that both people have Lyme. And it seems to be a little bit higher percentage than I might expect couples getting this randomly, okay? However, couples may all do the same things out in the wood. They may go do the same hikes. They may all have the same tick exposure. So just the fact that it seems to be a little higher in couples doesn't necessarily mean it's sexually transmitted. So I think there is a possibility of sexual transmission, but I don't know for sure. I cannot tell you whether it's a greater risk with vaginal versus oral. What I can tell you is if either one of you is on, if a person that has it is on antibiotics, I think that the chances of it being transmitted while you're on antibiotics is 0. And the reason I say that is we know from a transmission in pregnancy that if a female is on antibiotics during pregnancy where you have direct mixing of baby's blood and mom's blood in the placenta, direct mixing of blood, no barriers there at all, that we can cause that transmission to go from 50% during pregnancy down to 0% if a woman is on antibiotics. So I suspect the same thing is going to happen in terms of sexual transmission. So Cynthia, I'm sorry, I can't give you solid information here. No one's done that adequate science to really look at it. Okay. All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Ruth. Let's see. I had Lyme co-infections for 2.5 years now and have been on both herbs and antibiotics over the course of my treatment. I would say currently I'm at about 90%. I'm trying to decide if going down the disulfiram path is worth it. What are your thoughts on this? So I think it could be a viable option for you, but you have to enter it knowing some ins and outs about it. Okay, so first of all, disulfiram, everyone, is a drug that was designed to treat alcoholism. And what it does in alcoholism is it blocks a product of alcohol from being degraded or detoxified. And that chemical builds up, acetaldehyde builds up within a person and becomes toxic to them, making them sick with headaches and throwing up and severe abdominal pain. Okay, so the way it prevents an alcoholic from drinking is they know if they're taking this, they know they're going to get really sick if they have alcohol. Now, about over 2 years ago now, there's a laboratory at Stanford University where the researchers were growing what's known as persister Lyme, which is Lyme that, or they developed persister Lyme, I should say. Persister Lyme can live in you in 2 growth states. One is growing forms, and there's another form which are hibernating forms where the germ basically slows down and goes into hibernation. And in hibernation, it can ignore antibiotics. Those are called persisters, okay? All right, and so Stanford was trying to see, well, what can we use for those persisters? And they literally were doing a study where they took about every type of drug that is available in the drug prescribing database here in the United States. They tried it to see if it would work against Lyme. And they published their paper, and kind of as a footnote in the paper, it wasn't even the main thing the paper was about. They said, oh, by the way, we also discovered that this drug disulfiram happens to be something that treats these persister forms of Lyme, and we think it needs some more research. That's all they said. Okay, so out of that then, there was a person that read about this and took it to his Lyme doctor, a guy named Dr. Ken Liegner out in New York State, and said, I want to try that. So Dr. Liegner put him on it, put a couple other people on it. And then in May of last year, May of 2019, Dr. Liegner published a case report about these 3 people. And in Dr. Liegner's case report, these were people that had kind of been stuck in their treatment, weren't getting all the way well. One of them got all the way better, and the other 2 had fairly good improvements, okay? So that kind of caught everyone's attention. So after that, then in November last year at the annual Lyme disease meeting where all of us go to, Dr. Liegner presented about his findings, but he actually talked about 31 patients he had tried it on. And of those 31 that he had it on, he considers that he got 6 into what he calls extended remission. There were about 5 or 6 that had to stop because of side effects. And I want to say more about that here in a minute. And then everyone else had various degrees of improvement, okay? All right. What I will tell you is I'm seeing similar results in my practice. I'm seeing that about 30% of people, I think, can get into remission when I use this. I have about 20 to 30% that cannot take it because of either side effects or horrible Herx reactions on it, okay? All right. And then there's another group that gets somewhat better, basically. All right. Now, there's some ins and outs of this medicine. So Disulfiram, first of all, when you have it, you can't have alcohol because it will cause those bad reactions, all right? But you also have to avoid anything else that might have alcohol or become alcohol or have trace amounts of alcohol. So for instance, foods that you want to avoid, you don't want to do any vinegars. You do not want to use any alcohol products on your skin. So that means your skincare products, perfumes, moisturizers, anything that might have alcohol in it, you can't use. You can't use alcohol mouthwashes, all right, because that could get absorbed too. And in this time of coronavirus and COVID-19, you got to watch your hand sanitizers because some of those have alcohol and that could get absorbed through your skin and cause problems too, all right? So no alcohol, no vinegar, no fermented foods. So that would mean things like kombucha and fermented foods like sauerkraut, okay? Those kinds of things, because fermented foods put off alcohol as well too, okay? All right. And then finally, you got to read all of your condiment bottles. So for instance, mustard has alcohol in it, all right, or has vinegar in it. And so therefore you do not want to use that either, okay? All right, then there's side effect issues. So first of all, this can cause some really strong Herxheimer reactions in some people. And because of that, we start very low and slow. What we try to do is we want to work up to what we call a target dose, and that is going to be about 4 milligrams to 5 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, okay? All right, so I know we all measure things in pounds here in the United States, but take your pounds and divide it by 2.2, and then take it times 4 or 5, and that's your target dose, basically, okay? Disulfiram is manufactured as 250 milligram pills and 500 milligram pills. There is a national shortage of it right now. And so if you're lucky enough, you can get it that way because your insurance will pay for it. But if you are not lucky enough to have a pharmacy, you can find it, then we have to have it compounded. And where we send it to be compounded often is a drug out in Massachusetts called Hopkinton Pharmacy. And they can make it actually a 62.5 milligram pills. They can make it about any strength you want. When we start using this medicine, because of the significant Herxheimer reactions that people can get, one way to start it is at 62.5 milligrams, either every 3rd day or every other day. And about every 10 to 14 days, you increase the dose by taking it another day. So you would go from, for instance, 62.5 milligrams every other day. And after 10 to 14 days, then you go to 62.5 milligrams every day. And then you would then from there go up to 125 milligrams, alternating with 62.5 milligrams every other day for 10 to 14 days. And then you go to 125 milligrams daily, for instance. That's a regimen I sometimes will use to start people, okay? If you are herxing badly, though, you don't want to increase the dose. All right. Side effects, there's two major side effects. Number one, some people get pretty severe psychiatric illnesses. Maybe about 10 to 15% of the time, you're going to have increased anxiety, depression. Some people hallucinate. So some people, we just have to stop it because of the bad psychiatric issues. There's also a group of people that can develop neuropathy on this. And that seems to be helped by trying to prevent it by being on what do I want to put them on zinc. You want to put people on zinc picolinate. I usually do 30 milligrams, 1 or 2 pills, 1 time a day. What happens is the disulfiram can chelate copper in the body, but that can be prevented by using the zinc, and by blocking that chelation of copper, that prevents some of the neuropathy from developing too. Okay. All right. So do I think it can help? Yeah, I've had a number of people that have had some great results off of it. I've had about 20% or so that I have to stop it because of side effects. And I got another group that's improving pretty well. Right now, there's some different ways you can use it now too. When Dr. Liegner started using it, he was not using any other antibiotics with it. At times I will use disulfiram on its own. But keep in mind, Lyme can exist in you in 2 growth states. It can be growing and it can be in persister forms. We do know from laboratory experiments that the disulfiram treats persister forms. In those same experiments that were done in Stanford, though, they did not do anything to show us what happens with growing forms of Lyme, all right? So you have to wonder, if you don't go after the growing form, can you get rid of it too, all right? Now, I will tell you, I've got a one patient that came to see me that never was on an antibiotic at all for her Lyme. She had Lyme for probably 30 years and finally decided to start treating it. And all she wanted me to do was disulfiram, and that's all I used. And after 6 months, she's 100% well, all right? What's interesting, though, is I didn't give her anything to target growing Lyme. So it makes me wonder, though, even though the research hasn't shown that disulfiram treats growing Lyme, does it, okay? But because that is a possible problem, that it doesn't, sometimes in my patients, I'll put them on disulfiram, and if I'm not getting enough improvement, then I may add antibiotics that specifically target growing forms of the germ, okay? All right? All right, so the one other thing I would just want to clarify, because many of you may be aware that Lyme lives as something called a spirochete, that's the corkscrew-looking thing, and they live in cyst forms as well too. And I want to make a distinction about that and persister forms, all right? So both spirochetes and cysts, those are the 2 forms of the germ, can have a growth state and persister states, okay? All right? So there's the 2 forms of the germ, spirochete and cyst, and then there's the growth state, which is either growing or persisting. And so we need, when we design treatments, we have to go after all of those basically. Okay. All right. So Ruth, I think it may be worth a try. Realize that you're going to probably take about 2 to 3 months to get up to your full dose. And then once you're up to your full dose, you want to stay at that full dose for about 4 months. Okay. Now, not everyone can reach their peak dose. Sometimes people can only get to half a dose, but I will tell you, even half a dose for many people will work. So find the dose you can tolerate. Try to see if you can stay at that for about 4 months. Okay? All right. Good luck to you, Ruth. Thank you for that question. Hello, Kara. Let's see. Is it minocycline or doxy that crosses the blood-brain barrier more easily? Can lumbrokinase replace antibiotics? And what do you think of mimosa pudica? All right. So first of all, so minocycline and doxycycline are both tetracyclines. Minocycline is more fat soluble, and therefore it may cross over into the brain more easily than doxy. Having said that, doxy actually gets into the brain fairly well on its own as well too, okay? So we recognize in medicine something called the blood-brain barrier, all right? That's what's supposed to keep toxins out of your brain. And effectively, it's a layer of fat that prevents things from the blood from getting into the brain. Okay, so it's a fat layer. And so things that are more fat soluble, things that get into and go through fat more easily, are going to have an easier time getting into the brain. And so minocycline, because it's more fat soluble, in theory, should get over into the brain a little bit easier. Having said that, doxycycline has pretty good brain penetration as well, too. Okay, all right. And then in terms of lumbrokinase, everyone, is an enzyme, a group of enzymes actually made by earthworms. Yep, that's where it comes from. In Lyme disease, we got to do some crazy stuff sometimes. What we recognize with Lyme is that in addition to having these different growth states and forms, Lyme can also bury itself in biofilms, which is a slime layer that covers the germ. Okay, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This is better than a science fiction horror movie in terms of an infection. Look at all these things that this germ does to survive, which makes it so hard for us to get rid of. We got biofilms, we got spirochetes, we got cysts, we got growing forms, we got persister forms. This is stuff out of a horror movie, basically. And that's why Lyme can be so difficult to treat in some people. Lumbrokinase can help treat the biofilm. All right. There's a variety of things you can use for biofilm, but lumbrokinase can do that. And so what a biofilm is, it's basically a mucopolysaccharide sugar slime, okay, that's held together and given form by a protein skeleton made up of a protein, blood clotting proteins in our body called fibrin, okay? Lumbrokinase breaks down the fibrin. And so if you break down the skeleton that's holding this glob of mucopolysaccharides together, then it'll fall apart, basically. At least that's in theory. Now, I will tell you, we don't have great research proving this, but in theory, that's how it's supposed to work, okay? The way to do it is 20 milligrams twice a day. It does not replace antibiotics, because all that it deals with is where the germs can hide under these biofilm layers, but it doesn't do anything to treat to kill the germs, basically, okay? And then in terms of Mimosa pudica, generally, I am not the biggest believer in that as being an effective agent for Lyme. I think there are better things you can do. My favorite two herbs to kill Lyme, if I'm going to go herbal, would be otoba bark and cat's claw. Many of you may know of otoba bark as being also called Banderol by Nutramedics, and the cat's claw is sold by Nutramedics as something called Samento, which are also parts of the Cowden Protocol. The only things that I really like out of Cowden are the otoba and the cat's claw. A lot of the other things that are part of his protocol, I just don't think really do that well. All right. So anyhow, those are my thoughts on that. Thanks for the question. All right, let's see here. Hello, Gail. Let's say hi, Dr. Ross. Can you tell me if rifampin is a more quote unquote, hardcore antibiotic in the gut and body than other antibiotics? Is it more dangerous with a higher risk of side effects? Have you ever had any patients have serious reactions to it or done permanent damage to their bodies from it? Hemolytic anemia comes to mind as a risk, etc. Also, could Bartonella affect the vestibular system, or is Lyme more likely to do this? And finally, how can either one throw off the vestibular system and cause dizziness and vertigo? And can they cause tinnitus? And if so, how? Gail, that's a lot of questions. Let's try to break it apart. So rifampin, everyone, is a drug that has been traditionally used in the world to treat tuberculosis. That was what it was originally designed to treat. But it is very useful against Bartonella, and it probably has good activity against some forms of Lyme, including the cyst form of Lyme. Okay, all right. Rifampin, if you can be a harsh drug in some people, but not everybody. The most common side effect of rifampin is going to turn your urine orange. Okay. Also your tears too. So you may even, if you wear contacts, you may see some staining of your contacts, for instance. It also can lead to some liver inflammation. And so therefore, when you're on it, you've got to have frequent blood testing done to see if your liver is handling it okay. And when I put people on it, I'm usually going to have them also on liposomal glutathione. Glutathione protects the liver from inflammation. Liposomal means it's well absorbed. It's microscopically wrapped in fat. Glutathione, many of you are familiar with, is a very powerful antioxidant that is made in every one of our cells in the body. It's there to repair injury. It's also there, used heavily in the liver to help detox, okay? So if I put people on rifampin to prevent some of the liver potential injury from that or liver inflammation, I'm going to have them take liposomal glutathione. For that product, I like a product by Research Nutritionals called Trifortify because they have data that shows it has good absorption. And you would want to do a teaspoon or 5 milliliters one time a day. I've had good luck at preventing liver inflammation when I do that. Okay, now, rifampin looks like it's a drug out of that is just very difficult. If you look at the side effect list, it's probably one of the longest side effect lists that you can see. And so it does look scary. In reality, what I see in my practice is I have about 95% of people that have no problem with it other than it gives them orange urine and some small amounts of liver inflammation, but nothing that's bad, okay? But about 5% of people do have reactions, and it can range from headaches, nausea, sometimes mood disturbances, the hemolytic anemia you describe, although I've never seen that occur in my practice. Some bad liver inflammation, sometimes you'll see it. But one of the more worrisome things that you can get is I've had a couple people develop what is known as a drug fever or a drug reaction, which results in a high temperature and severe muscle pain. And effectively what happens in that situation is it triggers an immune system attack against the drug and against you, all right? So if you're on it, I always warn my patients, if you're starting to get severe muscle pain and you have increased temperature, we got to stop this medicine. And those symptoms do go away. They are reversible, but I want to let you be aware of that. You've got to be careful. So if you're on it and you start getting increased temperature and bad muscle pain, that may not necessarily be that it's a Herx reaction. It just may be a really bad reaction to the rifampin, okay? I like rifampin, though. I use quite a bit of it in my Bartonella treatments. Recent research that got published in April of 2020 looked at what are the most effective, part of the study looked at what are the most effective drugs at treating growing Bartonella, not persisting Bartonella, but growing Bartonella. And it looks like both azithromycin and rifampin are the two strongest, although they're followed closely by the tetracycline family of antibiotics as well too, okay? All right, so it's a good drug, but you got to use it with some caution. In terms of tinnitus and vestibular function, yes, Bartonella can cause some dizziness and can sometimes cause ringing in the ears. Lyme can too, okay? I don't know which one has a greater likelihood of doing it. I see it in both situations. Let me see if that answers your question here. I don't know which one is more likely to do that. That was part of your question. In terms of how they cause the dizziness or vestibular dysfunction is they infect the nerve, or they can infect the vestibular system, the balance part of the ear, okay? All right. Good luck to you, Gail. Thanks for the question. Hello, Dr. Ross. Let's see, last time you said need to wait until you offered antibiotics, start the countdown clock toward 2 years without symptoms. I just want to clarify, do I need to also be off of herbal antibiotics and other herbal medications? Start clock. Thanks. Okay. What Tracy is talking about is, we had a question, I think it was about, how do you know when when Lyme might be cured? Okay, that it's out of you, that it's not going to come back, that you're not going to get a relapse, okay? And what I was describing is that there is I don't know if I quite said all these words, but I had participated in a discussion about this on one of the Lyme forums where physicians talk. We talk about patients and difficulties we're having and positive things that we're learning, and we share that information. But there was a discussion about at what point do we say somebody's cured? And I think it was pretty much a general consensus, and this was an idea that came out of by Dr. Burrascano, is actually the one that kind of brought this up, is that if a person has not had a relapse for at least 2 years while they are off of antibiotics, that it probably means they're cured. Okay, now that's not absolute, but probably means they're cured. Okay, that means off of both prescription antibiotics and off of herbal antibiotics, to answer your question. Okay, all right. Thanks for that question, Tracy. Good luck to you. Hello, Jackie. Let's see. Could you please give me your thoughts on my persistent symptoms having treated Lyme disease, Babesia, mold, candida, heavy metals for years? Recently finished 6 months of Disulfiram, 250 milligrams 5 times per week for 6 months. I'm now treating Bartonella with Rifampin 300 milligrams daily, beginning mid-May, and azithromycin 500 milligrams daily from early July, and methylene blue 50 milligrams twice a day from March, and targeting to finish all by the end of October. However, I still have aches, pains in the small joints, fingers, hands, wrists, feet, toes, lower back. Standing up in the morning feels like I'm walking on broken glass. Water retention, puffy face, buzzing, burning, hot hands, day sweats, mood changes, anxiety, elevated glands under the chin, blurred vision, hair loss, bloating. Recent improvements include improved strength, stamina, and cognitive processing. Question is whether my remaining symptoms are more likely Bart or Lyme, as my doctor is considering low-dose dapsone. Thank you. So, Jackie, I am at a major disadvantage that I cannot do a question-answer exchange with you here to clarify things, okay? What I can tell you is in that list of symptoms are some things that make me think of Bartonella, and in that list of symptoms are things that make me think of Lyme, and in that list are symptoms that make me think of crossover between the two. So from what you wrote here, and I said wrote because I don't get to ask you a lot of questions and get answers here, is I think there's a possibility of both, all right? Again, Disulfiram, although you did it, doesn't necessarily get everyone into relapse, okay? The regimen you currently are on, using that azithromycin rifampin, those are 2 antibiotics that are really good at treating growing Bartonella. And as many of you know, my Bartonella recommendations are you use 2 antibiotics that treat the growing forms. So you're doing 2 of the strongest, okay? And the other thing we know now, based on the research that was published in December of 2009, maybe November of 2019, and most recently, again, another study published here in April of 2020 shows us that Bartonella has persister forms, all right? And so, and also that newer study here in April also showed us that Bartonella grows biofilms too, all right? And so methylene blue is a good agent to deal with biofilms and to treat persister Bartonella. I will also tell you from previous research out of the same lab that published these articles, this is Johns Hopkins lab under the direction of Ying Zhang, MD, Dr. Zhang. Dr. Zhang's lab had previously looked at options to treat persister Lyme too, and they found that methylene blue is also a good agent for persister Lyme. So this regimen you're on actually is not just a Bartonella regimen. It's actually a pretty good Lyme regimen as well too. And you're dealing with persisters for Lyme as well by being on this methylene blue as well too. Okay, but you do this regimen up through around October, you're not getting all the way there, then yeah, you might want to consider using a dapsone persister regimen to treat Lyme. All right, so everyone, dapsone is another drug that we can use as part of persister regimens. I'll just leave it there because Jackie didn't specifically ask me to explain dapsone. I will show you an article that you can use to look at what is dapsone. Is this something you might want to put into your regimens as well too? All right, let me go ahead and do that now. Thanks for that question, Jackie. All right, everyone. This is my Treat Lyme information site, Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD. If you want to look at what to do about persister forms of the germ, you could take a look at the persisting forms of Lyme, actually. Take a look at my section here called Infection Treatment Plans. And you could take a look at this article called How to Treat Persister Lyme, What Works. And in here, you can look at the various options that you have, including things about how to use dapsone. To read more about dapsone, because there's a couple ways you can use it, you would want to click on this article called Dapsone for Lyme Persisters, which brings you to this article. And this one I recently updated within the last month, okay? Talks about 2 different ways that you can use dapsone to help you, all right? All right, in terms of Bartonella and what you can do for growing Bartonella and persister Bartonella, take a look at this article called Kills Bartonella, Brief Guide. Basically, in here, I talk about which antibiotics to use for growing Bartonella and also what you can use for persisters. The 2 main persister agents that I talk about in this article are oregano oil, specifically liposomal oregano oil, and methylene blue. Okay, but you can take a look at it in that article. All right. Thanks for that question. Good luck to you. Hello, Amy. Let's see. With regard to Lyme or Bart affecting the bladder, do we know if the bladder is able to heal or if there might be permanent damage? Yes and yes. And I don't mean to be facetious there. So in many people, the bladder does heal. There are occasional people that I treat that I think I get rid of most of their other Bartonella or Lyme symptoms, and sometimes the bladder issues remain, but it's rare, actually. It's not that common that happens, okay? So bladder irritation often can be part of something known as interstitial cystitis, inflammation of the bladder, caused most often by Bartonella, but occasionally can be caused by Lyme as well too. And so treating those infections often will help it. The other thing you can do is to use some herbs that actually support bladder function as well too. And so specifically quercetin, which is a chemical that comes from fruits and vegetables, predominantly onions actually, is very useful at lowering inflammation that is found within the lining of the bladder wall that we see in interstitial cystitis. And then if you can pair that with glucosamine sulfate, which many of you may know, glucosamine is something we use to rebuild cartilage in people that have arthritis in their big joints, that glucosamine sulfate in the bladder is converted into a microscopic covering of the lining of the bladder. And so it protects that lining from being irritated or inflamed further by your urine, okay? So you could buy these 2 supplements independently. You could do quercetin as a 250 milligram pill, take 2 of those 3 times a day, coupled with glucosamine sulfate, 500 milligrams, 3 times a day. And often probably about 50 to 60% of the time, you can get significant relief in the burning as well as in the urinary frequency and the bladder pain that people often have with this, okay? All right. The other way to get it is to actually just take them all combined in a single supplement. And there is a product made by a company called Vitanica, and that is called Bladder Ease. And Bladder Ease, it has both quercetin and it has the glucosamine sulfate in it, and that you would do as 4 pills 3 times a day, okay? But people can get significant relief using those, all right? All right. Let me do a quick screen share here. I just want to show you, if you want more information about this, let me just give that to you here. All right, so take a look at my online Lyme guide again here and look in the bladder chapter and look at this article called Interstitial Cystitis and Bladder Pain. And in here, I talk about some diet changes you can make to help with it. But then I talk about this Bladder Ease herbal combination. It has L-arginine, quercetin, and glucosamine in it. Okay, all right. So yeah, those are the combinations. And then let me just show you one more thing. So if you're looking for a source for some of the supplements that I talk about tonight, anyone can order through my supplement store. This is the store that I use for my existing patients. But if you're wanting to make sure, if you're using a high quality product, I try to take the guesswork out of it for you. You know, there's a lot of questions about whether supplements are good or good quality. I've done a lot of investigating on this, so anyone can order from here. In terms of that product I was telling you, it's called Bladder Ease. And this is the product right here. Okay, all right. All right. Thanks for that question, Amy. Hello, Henry. Let's see, Dr. Ross. Thank you for what you do for the Lyme community. You're welcome. I'm about to hit 6 months of treatment for BBB, and I have been progressing positively on antibiotics. My Lyme literate medical doctor is recommending that I remain on antibiotics for 3 months post last symptom, and then he is recommending stem cell treatment. Do you have any experience with stem cell treatment, and what are your thoughts? Thank you. I don't do stem cell treatment in my practice. I don't find it effective, and I'm not just saying that based on my own experience. I'm saying that based on some data, okay? So first of all, stem cells are the most rudimentary cell in the body, okay? And they can basically turn into anything. The best stem cell would be something known as a pluripotent stem cell, meaning it can turn into any tissue. And the source of that is fetal tissue, which is illegal to do here in the United States, okay? So you're not able to get a pluripotent, meaning it can turn into any kind of cell and correct any kind of tissue damage of any organ or cell in your body here in the United States. It's not available here, okay? What is available here in the States is to do a type of stem cell treatment where they take fat from your body and they remove that fat and they find stem cells that are in that, and they use that as the stem cells. Now, the trouble with that is those stem cells are types of stem cells that are programmed to turn into connective tissue in the body, like tendons and ligaments and maybe even cartilage, but they are not programmed to turn into brain tissue. They are not programmed to turn into immune cells, etc. Okay, all right. So a few years ago, there were a lot of people that were rushing to get all their stem cell transplants done, etc. And generally, most of them were disappointed at the end outcome. Now, a few years ago, or last year, I think it was, maybe it was last year or the year before, LymeDisease.org, which is used to be called the California Lyme Disease Association, came up with a study has been doing a research project where they ask anyone that has Lyme disease that wants to have information, will allow information to be collected about them, to enroll in their program, and then they ask them questions. And there was a study a year ago or so where they looked at, they asked people if what their experience was using various forms of alternative therapy, of which stem cells was one of those. And I believe in their study, they found that only 5% of people that had done stem cell therapy reported any help from it at all, okay? In fact, let's look for that study. I'm gonna do a quick screen share and we can look at it together here. I'll see if I can find it at least here. Let's see. Oh. All right, let's see here. My Lyme data, alternative medicine. All right, this is the study, okay? And I'm just, in terms of stem cell therapies, it's right here. And actually, it's even worse than what I thought. Only 3% of people thought that they got any benefit from stem cell therapy, okay? In this study of people that had it, including people that had it, 3% had benefit. People using hyperbaric oxygen, about 22% of them thought they had benefit. People using ozone or oxygen therapies, about 40% of people thought they had benefit. People doing hyperthermia thought about 45% of them think they had improvement. Okay. Anyhow, I just show that to you. So this isn't just me saying I think stem cells don't work. This is also my Lyme data showing us, based on their survey of people that have had it done, that it doesn't work either. Okay. All right. Now, I think stem cells would have good possibility if we could do fetal tissue stem cells, all right, because they can turn into any damaged tissue and correct the problem. But we don't have that kind of availability here in the United States, all right? All right. Thanks for that question, Henry. Good luck to you. Hello. Oh, wait a minute. Actually, I'm going to do one more screen share. So I've actually written an article about stem cell treatment too, that if you want to read more about what I just said, about the different kinds of stem cells, how one can turn into another, etc., take a look here. All right, this is my article called About Stem Cell Therapy, okay? And so I review the different kinds of stem cells, even umbilical cord stem cells and the fat stem cells, et cetera. And I talk to you about whether it works or not. Okay? All right, there you go. Hello, Emily. Let's see. I have a quick question. I'm currently recovering from Lyme and co-infections of Babesia and Bartonella after 5 years of treatment and have been almost symptom-free. I have no pain. My energy is becoming normal again, but I still feel like my brain is fogged and my concentration on task is still awful. Do you have any suggestions on how to remediate this issue? Thank you. Yeah. So 2 things to think about, okay? One, sometimes when you've treated yourself for Lyme, or you've treated yourself, but when you've been treated for Lyme, the antibiotics that we wind up using can cause some disturbances to the good bacteria that line your intestines, which can allow bacteria to grow. All right. And if you've got bacteria living in your intestines, they can create ongoing inflammation. They release toxins that get up to your brain and give you some brain fog still. And so the one thing you might want to look into is it possible that you have too many yeast in your intestines that's holding you back? Some things that could make you wonder about that would be if you have a lot of sugar cravings, if you notice that generally your health does worse when you have sugar, if you have a lot of intestinal gassiness and bloating, that can sometimes indicate it. If you notice that you have a lot of pimples or acne or eczema, that's worse. Those toxins that get into your blood from yeast can interact with the skin sometimes and lead to worsened skin conditions, including can even cause pimples and acne to occur as well too. Okay. All right. I'll show you an article that you can look at that has a full program that you can use to help figure out if you have too many yeast. I'll show that to you here in a minute. All right. All right. So if you do have too many yeast, treat that. See if that gets you the rest of the way. The other thing that can happen that you might want to look into or consider trying to see if it'll make a difference is when you have chronic infection in you, like Lyme and like the co-infections, it can lead to the immune system producing a lot of oxidizing agents. So for instance, white blood cells, one of the things they can do, some white blood cells will make hydrogen peroxide and literally barf it out on germs. Go stand next to a germ, release their hydrogen peroxide in the germ and kill the germ, okay? Hydrogen peroxide is an oxidizing agent. And oxidizing agents can damage tissues in the body, which is one of the reasons I'm kind of opposed to people doing ozone treatments and doing hydrogen peroxide treatments. I think that there's greater risk of damage than potential benefit, okay? Also, one other thing aside about those treatments, there's studies, because those are oxidizing agent treatments, and our blood is full of antioxidants, okay? So although a white blood cell that's full of hydrogen peroxide can barf on a germ and kill it, that's when they're standing right next to each other. But there's the area around it is full of antioxidants, which limits the ability of those oxidizing agents to damage other tissues, although it still can get some damage, okay? Proponents of ozone and hydrogen peroxide infusions as germ killers claim they kill germs. That's true on a petri dish, all right? But in the blood, it doesn't happen. And in fact, there's been studies done looking at this where if you were to take a test tube, put 1 drop of blood in there and then mix ozone, there is no killing that happens at all. All right. And the reason is that blood has antioxidants in it that neutralizes the killing effect of the ozone. So for those of you that are going and getting your ozone and your hydrogen peroxide because some doctor has told you they're going to kill your germs, I disagree with it totally. Okay. Now, I will acknowledge some people think they get benefit. In fact, the Lyme data that I just showed you said that 45% of people think they get benefit. What that benefit may be is doing ozone and doing oxidizing medicine causes better oxygen delivery into your mitochondria. Your mitochondria are your energy factories in the body, and if they get energized with oxygen, they're going to work better, giving you better energy and helping your tissues to heal, which is my segue to the next thing you should consider, okay? In addition to yeast, consider doing some mitochondria repair. All right. So what happens again is if you've had all these infections, your immune system has made extra oxidizing agents like hydrogen peroxide, which can damage cell membranes and can even damage the covering of your energy factories in your cells called mitochondria. That's oxidative damage to the mitochondria. If the mitochondria in your nerve cells, like up in the brain, have become injured, that means that the brain is starved of energy to heal itself, okay? So you can fix the damaged mitochondria. And specifically, what I like to do is to do something called phospholipid repair, which is to fix those damaged fats that are found in the covering of your mitochondria. And what does a good job based on research is a product called ATP 360, made by a company called Research Nutritionals. It has got good data showing improvements in mitochondria functioning. And based on my experience, I have found it to help with people's remaining energy problems and or difficulty with thinking. And so it's ATP 360. You do 3 pills 1 time a day. It's made by Research Nutritionals. I like to couple that with glutathione, which is a good antioxidant. Think of the ATP 360 as fixing the covering, so it works on the outside of the mitochondria. Think of the glutathione as a good antioxidant that repairs damage from the inside of the mitochondria. The reason you need to take more is once your cells are injured, your mitochondria are injured, they're going to keep trying to fix themselves and they keep burning out and exhausting their glutathione gas tank, all right? So if you put more glutathione in, that can help with the repair too. So my recovery program, if you still got a lot of brain fog after you've been treated, would be look for yeast. If you don't have yeast, then look at doing mitochondria repair. And at a minimum, use ATP 360, 3 pills 1 time a day, and do Trifortify Orange or Watermelon, which is the liposomal glutathione by Research Nutritionals. I like their product because they have data showing good absorption. And I would do 5 milliliters 1 time a day of that, okay? That would be what I would suggest, okay? All right. All right. Let me do a screen share so you guys can look at more information here. Okay, so back at my Lyme information site, in terms of information about ozone and science that shows those things that I just said, that it probably doesn't kill germs and that probably it helps your mitochondria work better, take a look at this article here, okay? All right. That's my ozone, hydrogen peroxide, vitamin C, UV, blood irradiation, and Lyme disease article. All right. And then in terms of fixing your brain fog, this is my article called Brain Fog and Lyme Disease, You Can Fix It. And here I talk about treat your infections, which you've already done, all right, including get rid of yeast. And then I talk about how to fix the nerve damage that may remain. I like using the glutathione, and I like using, I guess in this article, I need to update it. I talk about NT factor, but instead of using NT factor here, I would do the ATP 360 that I was just telling you about, okay? All right. And then one more thing. So here's an article I wrote about the different products that you can use to fix the covering, including NT factor, ATP 360, and ATP fuel. I describe the differences between all those products, and you can read about them here, including the science that says that they work. Okay? All right. All right, Emily, good luck to you. Thank you for that question. Hello, Lauren. Let's see. Thank you for all that you do. You're welcome. Your generosity and wisdom and kindness is priceless. If I lived closer, I would choose you to be my MD. Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate your comments. I want to help people. This is one way that I can do either by having people sit here directly in front of me in my office, or I can put resources out that you can use on your own or that you can use with your physicians to get some help. So I appreciate that. Oops, let's see here. Hello, Rhonda. I'm trying to get that posted. There we are. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I'm in Australia and wondering if you can give an indication of the approximate time frame required to treat Bart with your tier 1 antibiotics if it isn't a new infection. Also, does Bart get eradicated, or is it like Lyme, goes into remission? Thank you. All right. So in my experience, in my practice, I find that you can eradicate Bartonella. And that happens pretty straightforward in probably about 85 to 90% of patients. Sometimes you do need to treat a second time. And especially in people that have had relapses, I want to make sure that I include an agent that will treat for persisting forms of Bartonella. So, Ronnie, I'm not sure if you've read my most recent rendition of my Bartonella article. I did revamp it a number of years, just recently, about a month ago. So if you're looking at my Bartonella recommendations in my Lyme antibiotic book, or if you've looked at a previous version of my How to Treat Bartonella article, take a look at the updated version that I published about, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago now. It includes information about what are the best antibiotics to treat growing forms of Bartonella, but also talks about what do you use to treat these persister forms of Bartonella that I mentioned earlier tonight, okay? But if you're covering for both growing and persister forms, on average, doesn't matter how long you've had Bartonella, on average is 4 to 6 months to get well, and that works about 85-90% of the time. Make it 80 to 85% of the time. Okay. All right. If you're at that treatment point, 4 to 6 months, and you're just not getting anywhere, then you want to change to a different regimen. And I give you many options in that article, that Bartonella treatment guide. Okay. All right. Thanks for your question, Rhonda. Hello, Lynn. Let's see. Thanks for being here tonight, Dr. Marty. You're welcome. About history of Lyme with COVID, is it safe to assume we have existing inflammatory condition so that we might be more likely to experience a more severe case of COVID due to cytokine storms? And are the cytokines associated with Lyme, Bart, the same ones as we see in COVID? Are there lab tests to see if someone is predisposed to severe COVID? And is there any concern with taking anti-inflammatories like curcumin, quercetin that could cause the immune system to under-respond to COVID versus protecting from cytokine storm? Lastly, do you know if beta-glucan is an immune modulator versus stimulant, i.e. it cannot cause an overproduction of cytokines? Thank you. All right. Lynn, I think you asked me a similar question last week, or somebody did. And rather than taking the time to go through this right now, I'm going to direct you to take a look at the recording of last week. The webinar from 2 weeks ago. Okay. It's kind of a complex topic, and rather than take the time to go through that right now, I'd rather you take a look at the previous recording. All right. All right. Thanks for the question. Hello, Keith. Let's see. What are the best steps for alleviated brain fog? And the long-term prognosis, does this symptom go away for most? So Keith, take a look, rather than going through that again too, I just showed steps to deal with brain fog, that article I just showed a few minutes ago. Take a look at my Lyme disease treatment site and take a look at that article where I talk about how brain fog, just type brain fog in the search bar, you'll see it, steps to take to fix the brain fog. I just showed it here a few minutes ago. When it comes to doing the phospholipid repair section, instead of doing the NT factor, do ATP 360 instead, 3 pills 1 time a day. Okay? All right. Thanks for that question. Good luck to you. Hello, Patsy. Yeah, Dr. Ross. If other bacteria have persister forms, such as the bacteria that causes tuberculosis, why is the establishment so resistant to accepting the persister form of Lyme? Thanks for all you do. So, it's interesting. I mean, who knows? Lyme is such a political illness. I mean, it's kind of like the crazy politics going on in this country as to why people won't wear masks. I mean, for gosh sakes, we have good science showing that it will help. When they start wearing masks in states, suddenly we have decreasing rates, and yet we have all these people that are anti-maskers. And we've got a bunch of people out there that are Lyme denialists for whatever reason that they do it, okay? Regarding persisters, one of the arguments that the establishment will make about it is that although we are seeing persister forms in laboratory experiments, and we do, we can create persister Lyme in a lab. We can show that we can develop persister Lyme or persister Bartonella in a lab. However, it hasn't been shown to exist in human studies, living people, okay? In addition, there are no studies that show that treating, there are no studies. There's case reports. Ligner has a case report showing that Disulfiram, which is supposed to treat persisters, works. But there is not a well-designed human study that shows that treating persister forms actually makes a difference, okay? So although we can kill persisters in the lab on a petri dish, that doesn't mean that treating them in living humans is truly going to make a difference, all right? What happens in the lab is not always indicate what's going to happen in a living human, all right? So part of our problem is we don't have good science that shows that in living people, not in a petri dish, but in a living person, that treating a persister works. Number two, we don't have good science that proves that there are persister forms in humans, all right? Now, to be true, we do have, actually, I'll just leave it at that. There isn't solid science other than mainly laboratory experiments that show that they exist. And so for those people that want to deny Lyme, it's just another thing they can say, oh, you don't have good science, therefore it must not be real, okay? Doesn't mean it's not real, it just means we don't have good science yet. So they just choose to ignore, okay? All right, thanks for that question. Hello, Christina. Let's see. I had a question about Lyme and mold. I was diagnosed with Lyme 11 years ago and I have mold toxicity as well. It seems so many of my symptoms could come from either diagnosis. How will I know when I am Lyme free? I live in Northern California, so I don't think I'll ever be completely mold free. You raise a good question. I mean, both Lyme disease and mold toxicity illness create a similar problem. And why they can look almost identical is that both of them trigger your immune system to overproduce a bunch of inflammation chemicals called cytokines. And for those of you that are participating in webinars, I talk about cytokines quite a bit. But so here's my cytokine discussion tonight, okay? Because I haven't done it yet. So your white blood cells, there are certain white blood cells that fight infections. And when they see a germ, they create these chemicals called cytokines. And there's many kinds of cytokines. Cytokines are good and bad. On the good side, cytokines will cause more white blood cells to be made. They'll draw them to where the toxin is or the infection is, and they'll help those white blood cells work better. Okay, that's all good. But if the immune system is having a hard time getting rid of the mold, toxins, that is, or if the immune system is having a hard time getting rid of Lyme, it's going to keep trying harder and harder, and eventually it's going to overproduce cytokines. And so you wind up getting a cytokine excess syndrome, okay? And what too many cytokines cause is brain dysfunction, so you can't think, may feel cloudy or foggy, all right? Can make you hurt all over, can give you a lot of fatigue, can disturb your sleep centers so you can't sleep, make your joints hurt and swell, interfere with how your adrenal and your thyroid glands work. See what I'm saying? Basically, what we call Lyme symptoms are cytokine symptoms, and mold toxicity symptoms are cytokine symptoms as well too. All right, so they can look a lot alike. The only way to know if mold could be part of the problem and to see if you actually are a person that has the problem is to see if those mold toxins are in you. Okay, keep in mind that according to science, it looks like 75% of us, when we walk through a room that has mold toxins, our immune system can deal with it and remove them. 25% of us, though, our immune system is not able to do that. And those are the people that build up mold toxins in them from previous exposures or current exposures and cannot recover. So the first step is, if you're considering you could have mold toxin illness, is do a urine mold toxin test. See if you're peeing out excessive amounts of mold toxin. If you are, then spend some time trying to bind those mold toxins to pull them out of you using binders. Now, why do you use binders? Well, what's supposed to happen in the 75% of us is our immune system will see a mold toxin that we breathe in that gets into the blood, and it will tag it. It's going to tag it so that other parts of the immune system come in and break that toxin down. That happens in 75% of us, all right? But in 25% of us, those mold toxins don't get tagged correctly. They go to the liver as a fat-soluble toxin. The liver's job is supposed to transform that to a water-based toxin. And if it was able to, those water-based toxins would get moved out in the intestines, they mix in our poop, and we poop them out. And we never have trouble with them again, okay? But mold toxins don't allow themselves to be turned into water-based toxins. So they get moved by the liver out into the intestines through the bile system, through your gallbladder. And then out in the intestines, because they're still fat-based, they get reabsorbed right back into your blood system. And you just get this endless circulating loop of mold toxins that are triggering all that excess cytokines, okay? So what you can do is to try to grab hold of those mold toxins out in the intestines so they don't get reabsorbed. And to do that, we use binders, things like cholestyramine, which is a prescription that binds cholesterol combined up toxins, things like activated charcoal, things like bentonite clay, maybe chlorella, which might do it weakly. It's not the strongest one, okay? But there are all these binders that we can use. So you could do binders. And even if you're being continuously exposed, sometimes you can use enough binders that you can keep out what's coming in at you. You can remove all the stuff that built up in you and then remove anything that you keep getting exposed to, okay? Sometimes with mold toxins, you just got to change your environment. You got to get out of a house that has mold toxins in you. And if you use binders and you keep seeing mold toxins coming back in your testing, then it's time to look at your home and get it investigated and make sure you're not being exposed in your home. Okay? Okay. So those are my thoughts on that. I don't have a great answer for you, unfortunately, but those are the thoughts that I have for you there. Okay. All right. Thanks for that question. All right, I'm going to do a quick screen share here. All right, so if you want more information about mold toxins, take a look at my detoxification chapter and look at this article called Mold Toxin Illness. And here I talk more about the various ways that you can diagnose it, as well as the various binders you can use and how you would work with them to deal with mold toxin illness. Okay? All right. Hello, Carrie. Let's see. Hello. Thanks for all you do. You're welcome. Let's see. I was on Disulfiram for 2 months, got up to 250 milligrams, started developing horrible gastro issues, and was taken off of it. I've been off of it for a month and have developed awful neuropathy, relentless tingling, especially my lower legs, mood swings. My current LLMD wants me to take a break from everything for a bit, but I'm getting worse daily. I feel like I'm going crazy. Every time I eat, I feel like I am being electrocuted. I want to start treating with something soon and fear my Lyme will get worse. Appointments with my LLMD are few and far between, considering he's one of the only ones in my country. Any thoughts or guidance? What is happening to me? Thanks so much for all your help. Carrie, you're in a difficult situation here. And although I wish I could give you advice, I need a lot more information. I need more information about other germs you might have. I need more information about how reactive you are before all of this. I need a lot of information that I can't get in this kind of a format. So one thing you may want to consider is I can give you an opinion, but it would involve visiting with me online. It's a consult service that I run. I'll show you how to look into that here in a minute. And you may just want to set that up so I can give you some more specific information. In terms of the neuropathy, I will say one thing. Disulfiram can lead to neuropathy. And one of the things I will do if somebody has developed a neuropathy on disulfiram is I like to have them on glutathione to help repair the nerves from the inside. I like to repair the mitochondria and nerve covering from the outside using that ATP 360 I talked with you about. I also like to get them on zinc picolinate, and I would do a 30 to 60 milligrams of that one time a day. And then finally, I would consider being on a multi-B complex vitamin. That's just to deal with the neuropathy part. But in terms of, do you need to be on anything else to kill germs? Do you need anything else to repair? That I would need to have some discussions with you about to understand more about what happened to you here. Okay. All right. Let me show you how you can do that if you are interested in that. And what I'm about ready to show everyone, this is a service anyone can use. So my through my Lyme information site, you can click on my clinic up here. And that brings you to my practice website, which is Marty Ross MD Healing Arts. Take a look at the appointments section here. And in here, I describe the two types of visits I have. I have a full medical service or a limited consult service. I would suggest that you take a look at my limited consult service, read about it here, read everything that I wrote here. It's going to answer your questions about what can we do in this visit, what are the costs in it. It has forms that you need to fill out to send me in advance of it. And if you do decide you want to do it, click on this Book Now button to set it up, okay? I use a telemedicine platform to do it, so I can visit with people around the world, and that's usually what I wind up doing, okay? All right. Hold on here a minute. Oops, I think I forgot to do a screen share on that. Let me go back here just a minute. What did I do? Carrie, I'm going to try that again. I think I forgot to screen share. Hold on just a minute. All right, so again, you would go to, from my Lyme information site, Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD, click on the clinic tab up here, which will bring you to my appointments page. You want to read all about my limited consult service, including the forms I want you to fill out. And then if you want to do that, hit the book now button. Okay? All right. All right. Good luck to you, Carrie. Hello, Donna. Let's see. What do you suggest for treatment of eosinophilic fasciitis? I know that the treatment is steroids, but they are not recommended with Lyme. I also have mesyl activation disease triggered by Lyme and can't tolerate most supplements, antibiotics, or herbals. Thanks so much. Donna, I don't know. I would need to read a little bit more about eosinophilic fasciitis. I need to do more background reading. I haven't had to deal with this specific situation before, so I couldn't give you a valid answer right now. All right. I'm sorry about that. Good luck to you. Hello, Joyce. Hi, Dr. Ross. I was diagnosed with Lyme in 2001. 4 weeks of doxy, unusual symptoms over the years, and finally diagnosed in 2016 with Lyme, Bart, and Babesia. Minocycline for a few weeks, artemisinin for several weeks, Plaquenil less than a month. Now on only herbs, Cidacuda and Houtenita for about 3 months. Recently added cat's claw, planning to add Banderol. Please explain the difference between cat's claw and Samento. Is it okay to put herbs in aloe water to deal with burning stomach? Is it okay to put herbs in boiling water to burn off alcohol to avoid burning stomach? I am hoping to add Banderol soon. I'm up to 9 drops twice a day of cat's claw and doing okay with it so far. Thank you as always. Okay, so Samento is made by a company called Nutrimetics, and it is their version of cat's claw. It is what is known as a TOA-free variety of cat's claw versus other cat's claw, like cat's claw I sell at my store by a company called Wildcraft Herbs, has TOA in it, okay? TOA, the A in that stands for alkaloids, and alkaloids can sometimes be toxic to the liver. So sometimes companies that manufacture their cat's claw, where they're not sure if doctors are going to be watching over you, for instance, are going to avoid putting alkaloids in. However, I think the concern is way overblown up. And in fact, if we look at sources like Buhner, as in Buhner Herbs, Buhner thinks that alkaloid-containing cat's claw is more effective than the TOA-free. So I tend to work more with alkaloid-containing. I think it may be more effective. And I think that the concern about toxicity and injury to the liver is overblown up in terms of the dose and ranges that I like using on that, which is 30 drops twice a day. Okay. All right. Now, in terms of the alcohol being very irritating, it can be for some people. What I tell people is ideally I would like them to have these on an empty stomach, but if they can't tolerate it that way, try it on a full stomach, try it with food, any kind of food. And so therefore the aloe would be okay. I don't think there would be a problem with that, and see what happens. See if you get any improvements with that. Okay. I will periodically have people burn steam the alcohol off. Keep in mind there are studies done that show that even steaming alcohol off does not remove all the alcohol. In fact, I had to look into that because I have a number of patients that I wanted to have them still remain on some of their Otoba, Cidacuda, cat's claw, and Houtenilla while we were using Disulfiram. And when I started looking at the studies suggest that you still have quite a bit of alcohol that remains even after you try to steam them off. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Joyce. And thank you for that question. Hello, Eric. Let's see. I was recently diagnosed with Borrelia babesia via DNA PCR by DNA Connections. It was from tooth extraction, blood, and tissue. I've read that you do not think much of this test. I've been bouncing from doctor to doctor for 10 years. I have all the symptoms. My Horowitz Lyme MSIDS questionnaire is 130. I suspect I've had Lyme since childhood. I'm 49. Do you believe that antimicrobials can heal me? I've heard and read that longstanding cases do not respond so well and even get worse. What have you observed in your clinic? The answer is yes, I think there is a chance you can get well. The truth is that yes, if you've had it in your longer, it can sometimes make it more complicated to recover, but I give you a great chance of recovery. That's what I see in my practice, okay? If you do have a high MSID score like you do, there's a great possibility this is Lyme. My issue with DNA connections is that they're doing a PCR test to see if you have the DNA of the germs in you. The problem I have with them is they haven't gone out and done any validation studies to show us that when a test comes back positive, is it real? What a company is supposed to do when they develop a test, they are supposed to take known cases of an illness and see how good is their test at detecting it. And when they do that kind of testing, they should be able to tell us what percentage of the cases do they pick up. They should also be able to tell us how many times does their test say it's positive when actually there is not the infection there. And DNA Connections never did that. When they first started promoting their tests, and they did a great job of marketing their services to naturopathic doctors who all seemed to rush and pick this test up, I started getting a lot of people coming in that had been to their NDs and wanted another opinion. And many of them were bringing in their DNA Connections testing, showing they had Bartonella and showing they had Babesia, when they had no symptoms of these illnesses at all. None. And so I really questioned the validity of that test. It is possible, based on what I saw, that the PCR part for Lyme may be accurate because it seemed to have more relationship to what I saw in my patients. But I do not think DNA Connections is reliable as a source of information when it comes to co-infections. I just have not found it to be that way in my practice at all. And that's what my issue is with them. Okay? All right. Good luck to you, Erica. All right, everyone. That's it for me for today. Been great to be here with you again. I'm going to go ahead and get the recording taken care of and edited up tonight and try to have it out to you first thing in the morning, along with the description about what we talked about. When you get that email from me tomorrow, take a look at it. It will also have buttons that you can click on to sign up for next week's webinar, okay? And remember, I'm doing one next week and the week after. I would appreciate if you're getting benefit out of doing these webinars, if you would share it with other people you think could benefit too. It's good if we can spread this by word of mouth. So I appreciate if you're getting benefit, please share it, okay? I want to try to reach as many people as I can to help them, okay? All right. So nice being here with you tonight, everyone. And I hope you all have good evenings. And I look forward to seeing you next week as well, too. Good night.